Well, hello, America. It's Al Ferguson with the Happening Out Television Network, and we have a very special interview for you today, and that is with Roger Stone. Now, an interesting interview, I think, we're going to have with the LGBT community. Roger Stone is celebrating his 5th decade in politics. Some call him notorious. He has created a substantial impact, not only on conservative politics in America, but the country as a whole. Mr. Stone, thank you for being with us here today.
Delighted to be here.
Can I call you Roger?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, that's great.
Makes me feel younger.
Yes, okay, good. Oh, it's one of the things we're going to talk about. You are first and foremost interesting to me because of all of your brand marketing. You seem to me to be very ahead of the curve. Your Free Roger Stone movement and your Republican fingers as you hold them up. You have worked with the presidents in either campaigns or advising, including Nixon, Reagan, Dole, Trump. That's a pretty impressive resume in conservative politics.
Absolutely. I mean, I have had the luxury of supporting men and women for public office that I believed in. Early in my practice, I had to take anybody who walked in the door. I mean, political consulting is a very, very competitive business. It's become more and more competitive as more and more people who have no qualifications whatsoever have joined the field because it looks easy from the outside. But I've had the luxury of helping support men and women whose fundamental beliefs I believed in.
Well, we're going to talk about a number of those situations. A lot of people in the LGBTQ community probably do not know that your lobbying organization in Washington was with Paul Manafort, and one of the most successful in history. What was that experience like working with Paul Manafort?
Well, after the 1980 Reagan election, Charlie Black and Paul Manafort and I all confronted the question of whether we wanted to go into government or whether we wanted to stay in private practice. I had no interest in being in government because I had for a very brief time worked at the Office of Economic Opportunity under Don Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld was one of the many proteges of Richard Nixon. Nixon was a great believer in developing a bench. He had a number of young proteges who he helped get elected to Congress or the Senate, or he in some cases appointed to office, which really became the future of the party. Rumsfeld was among them. I'm not a fan of Rumsfeld's war policies, but that's another story. In any event, Don Rumsfeld was sent over to the Office of Economic Opportunity, and I was sent over with him. I think I lasted 6 months. I'm not interested in the paperwork and the minutia of government. My interest is in the mechanics of politics and how to use the mechanics of politics to elect men and women to offices where they can effectuate public policies that I agree with.
Let me make the connection to your classic Nixon pose with your two arms up and the fingers. So your loyalty, respect, the reiteration of that image is because Nixon taught the training of develop a bench and then be loyal to the bench.
Well, that's part of it, but let's cut to the chase.
Okay.
As you know, I have a tattoo of Richard Nixon on my back.
I'm getting ready to ask you about it. We're going to put that up right now because the LGBT community is going to be shocked and fascinated.
Well, first of all, it makes me the only person you know with a dick on the front and the back. But the point of this is not even a political statement. It really isn't. The point of this is, for me, a daily reminder that in life, when things don't go your way, when you get knocked down, when you suffer defeats, when you're discouraged, when you want to quit, when you think you're finished, that's the time you have to get up off the canvas and get back in the game. And the story of Nixon, regardless of his politics, and his politics would be considered quite progressive by today's standards, is a story of resilience. It's a story of persistence. It's really very much an American story. So if you ask me which president I philosophically and ideologically most aligned with, it wouldn't be Nixon. it would probably be Reagan, or maybe even Eisenhower. But what I admire about Nixon is his personal resilience, that he comes back from defeat, and after defeat, this is someone who was given nothing. This is someone who grew up dirt poor, put himself through college, put himself through law school, took on an improbable House race where everyone said he couldn't win, spent only 4 years in the House. Recognize he went from being a lieutenant mustered out of the U.S. Navy to being Vice President of the United States in 6 years. 4 years in the House, 2 years in the Senate, onto the national ticket, and then on 6 national tickets. It's an incredible accomplishment.
And it's interesting to me, you talk about resilience. What's your reaction when I say the LGBT community understands that conceptual observation completely? Because our entire community is built on the resilience to remind yourself that you have to stand up over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a lesson for everybody. Doesn't matter who you are. The point, of course, is never quitting.
Never quit.
Nixon, I think, said, "A man is not finished when he's defeated. He is only finished when he quits." Until one has been in the deepest valley, one cannot appreciate the majesty of the highest mountaintop. This is certainly true in my own career. I've had highs and lows. I've had victories and defeats. The key point is to never quit, to keep pursuing your goal, whatever that may be.
Before we move on to, and I do want to talk a lot about the LGBT community and your embracement of it, but in this vein about having the tattoo on your back and between your shoulder blades. I love the soundbite. You're the only man that I've ever met that has dicks both in the front and the back.
Works at the dinners, I must tell you.
The
blue-haired Republican ladies kind of blush, but it's a crowd stopper.
I read and I saw an image of it recently, or relatively recently. You got a second tattoo on your back.
No, that's untrue.
That is not true.
That is
okay.
not true.
So let's debunk it right now.
I have thought about adding Barry Goldwater, who really is the person who got me into politics, because he believed in individual personal freedom. The smallest, least intrusive government is possible. Government out of the boardroom, out of the bedroom. Do what you want. That's your right as an American. He hated surveillance by the government. He hated the whole concept of the erosion of our civil liberties. Reagan, because of his strength as president, rebuilding our economy, rebuilding respect for the country around the world. Nixon, who's already there, reached a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets, opened the door to China. I think he'd be rolling in his grave if he knew how the Bushes and the Clintons were going to give the Chinese the key to the store. That's a different question. Ended the Vietnam War, ended the military draft for 18-year-olds, gave us the 18-year-old vote, desegregated the public schools without incident. When he became president, 82% of the American schools were still segregated. By the time he left, it was like in the 20s. The saving of Israel unilaterally in the 1973 Yom Kippur War over the objection of his own chief of staff, of his own joint chiefs, of his own national security advisor, Henry Kissinger. Against all advice, he ships $37 million worth of lethal aid to the Israelis, who have their backs against the sea due to a surprise attack by the Egyptians and the Syrians. The war on cancer. His accomplishments
Are
really
significant.
go on, and then of course you have Trump, who rebuilt our economy when everybody said it couldn't be done. People said, "Well, America's great days are behind you. You can no longer be a leader. These jobs are never coming back," and so on. So, I would consider having a Mount Rushmore type effect on my back with all of them. Except for it would hurt like hell.
Yeah, and who would it be?
It would be Goldwater, Reagan, and Trump. I would add them to Richard Nixon.
Yeah. So your tattoo, you would turn into Mount Rushmore between your shoulders.
That's the idea, but boy, it would take a quart of vodka.
Yes, a quart. All right. Well, also a very good LGBT embracement. I want to ask you specifically, before we move on to some other issues, you have the self-proclaimed title of the Dirty Trickster. Is that true?
Yeah, no, I argue with that. I've never called myself that.
Oh, it did not come out of your mouth?
No, and
Okay.
I actually got the LA Times to print a retraction because I got sick of it. It is ubiquitous. You can read every place in the last year, self-proclaimed or self-attributed. I have attributed that others have called me that, and therefore I'm stuck with it. It's going to be in my obituary, it's going to be on my tombstone. There's not much I can do about it. I will certainly admit to being a practitioner of hardball politics. This is America. Politics has always been hardball. Abraham Lincoln's opponents handed out flyers, a handbill, saying that he had fathered a multiracial child. We had one of our early presidents was reputed to be gay. They called him Nancy, and they handed out flyers about that. So,
which president?
I think it was not Franklin Pierce, but Millard Fillmore. I'm uncertain.
Yeah.
I can look it up, but it's an accurate reference. The point is, all that's changed is the method of delivery. We used to use handbills, now we use the internet. Now, that said, I don't think I've ever done anything that my contemporaries haven't done, and I'm prepared to do whatever's necessary to elect my candidate short of breaking the law. Now, one man's dirty trick is another man's civic participation. One man's dirty trickster is another man's freedom fighter. In 1960, Robert Kennedy, somebody I admire, whose son I particularly admire, and is a friend of mine, in the 1960 West Virginia primary, sends anti-Catholic literature to every Catholic household in the state and makes it look like it came from Hubert Humphrey, their opponent. And the liberals think this is clever. How clever of them. If a Republican did that, or if I did that, oh, what a heinous dirty trick. By the way, that was not illegal in 1960. It would be illegal today. So dirty tricks are even in the eye of the beholder.
All right, so you didn't say it, it was applied on you, you got a retraction from it. I wasn't sure about that.
I'm stuck with it, whether I like it or not.
I'm going to come back to the common ground observation you made later in the interview. I want to talk about your books. I didn't realize what a prolific author you are and writing. How many books have you written?
I've written 5 books.
5.
Soon to be 6.
Okay. Oh, what's the book that's in the works
This
now?
entire ordeal that I've been through has to be laid out because, incredibly, I was for 16 months under an unconstitutional gag order. So you're not allowed to defend yourself.
Are you not still?
Today the gag order is removed.
Okay.
But for 16 months, CNN and MSNBC and the Washington Post particularly, which is dominant within the jurisdiction in which I was being tried, are literally raining shit on me on a daily basis, at least 80% of which is just incorrect, or their greatest trick, they omit key facts to create a false impression, yet the judge rules I am not entitled to respond to any of that and defend myself within the realm of any platform whatsoever. Not to a public meeting, not on a TV show, not on an interview with gay TV, not on the internet, not on social media. Clearly unconstitutional. When I appealed that ruling, it went to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. They sat on it for 5 months, even though it was a very simple question, and then they ruled procedurally I had to first ask the judge who imposed the gag order to remove it before it was appropriate for review by the circuit, which they could have ruled 2 days after I filed.
And your book,
by then it was trial time.
Your book is going to outline all of this process of exactly what happened.
It's going to outline the entire process of being hunted for political reasons by the federal government. Because what happened to me, where you lose your voice, you lose your freedom of movement, you lose your home, your car, your insurance. Because of the gags, your ability to make a living, that can happen to any. If it can happen to me, it can happen to any American with the blink of an eye.
I want to mention later in the interview Mueller and some of the Attorney General's comment at the House Judiciary Committee. But broadly, first off, do you have a title for the book yet?
I do not.
Yeah.
Working title would be a MAGA Martyr, but I'm still open to suggestions.
Yeah, and publishing date approximately?
After the election.
Yeah, definitely after the election. And it's interesting in terms of what you brought up in terms of the removal of the gag order. We're broadcasting right now this interview from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We joke in our shows that we're broadcasting in the gayest place on planet Earth. South Florida has one of the highest LGBT density populations in the United States. The pressure of when the federal government came in for the arrest, etc. When I watched that, and I watched CNN covering it live, and how they knew it was happening, unclear. But I watched
not really.
it.
We can get into that.
Yeah, well, let's do that. And I watched it. But my number one thing was, what was your reaction? Why all of that was going on? How did you feel? You're this libertarian, and what you've just outlined that you say you're going to explore in the book.
I think it requires some background. So for almost 2 years, there was a drumbeat of leaks from the special counsel's office. Roger Stone will be indicted for treason, espionage, conspiracy against the United States, money laundering of millions of rubles into US dollars in violation of the foreign campaign contributions ban, mail fraud, wire fraud, cyber crimes including unauthorized access to a computer, cyber crimes including the receipt and dissemination of stolen data, aiding and abetting a conspiracy, accessory to a conspiracy after the fact. Just a constant. Robert Mueller now has Roger Stone's IRS and banking records. How else could CNN know that but from a leak? Leaks are illegal from the special counsel. So I had to endure 2 years of this, and I counterpunched as best I could, because I certainly know there was no Russian collusion. I knew that I had never received anything from WikiLeaks and passed it on, and that I had no advanced knowledge of the source or content of what they were going to publish. I only knew that they were going to publish something in October that was significant because Julian Assange said on CNN in June that he would do so. It's not a state secret. So it was perplexing because I was clearly cognizant of the fact that 19 of my current and former associates had been dragged in front of the grand jury and browbeat, and this fellow Aaron Zelinsky, who I will file multiple complaints about because of his misconduct as a prosecutor, was kind of like Captain Ahab with the whale. In other words, where are the WikiLeaks documents? We know he has them. We know he's hiding them. Well, it's just not true. And despite this legal proctological examination that they gave me, poking into every corner of my life, they could find no evidence of any of those crimes whatsoever. So I still felt that I would be charged, but I couldn't figure out what it was that I could be charged with, because I knew I was guilty of none of those crimes. By the end of 2018, this became a weekly drumbeat. Mueller zeroes in on Stone. Mueller tightens the noose on Stone. Mueller totally focused on Stone. And then on January 25th, on January 24th, I got a phone call from a producer at CNN who said, I need your home address. I want to mail you something. I said, all right. Well, I gave her my home address, realizing that my home address could be found online fairly easily. But then when I went online and looked, I noticed that there were two addresses since I had fairly recently moved, and that may have caused some confusion. So I said to my wife, they're coming tomorrow morning to arrest me. And she said, you've been saying that for 6 months. I said, no, I'm pretty sure this is tomorrow. Still can't figure out what the charges might be, but I do think we need to be prepared. So I set my alarm for 5 a.m. I got up, I took a shower. I put on one of my Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirts. and I sat in an upstairs bathroom window where you could see the entire front yard. At about 5:45, my cell phone rang. It was a member of the Fort Lauderdale Police Department who just happens to be a friend. And he said, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm kind of waiting. Why? He said, well, I'm over at Starbucks. There must be 30 FBI agents here getting coffee, and the drift I get is they're headed to your house. And I said, well, I've been expecting